Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar delivered by CAFRE Beef and Sheep Branch. I'm Francis Breen from CAFRE and I will be chairing tonight's event, which is focused on Jonathan Blair's farm just outside Ballykelly. Jonathan is a member of the Better Farm Beef Challenge programme, a programme delivered as a partnership between CAFRE, the Irish Farmers Journal and ABP Food Group. There are 10 farmers from across Northern Ireland participating in this programme. Through the support of a dedicated advisor, Darrell Boyd, we are developing each of these 10 farms to improve their profitability. A key focus of the programme is to demonstrate to other suckler farmers how the adoption of technologies facilitated by CAFRE advisory input can lead to improvements in profitability. Progress is featured every week in the Irish Farmers Journal. Additionally, we normally hold open events on these farms each year to highlight progress. Given current circumstances, we have decided to use this online platform to allow you to see and question the host farmer, Jonathan Blair, the programme advisor, Darrell Boyd, and also tonight, Jonathan's vet, Craig Campbell from Drumahoe Vets. This event will give you some background to progress on Jonathan's farm and then focus on the themes of winter management of cattle and animal health planning. The event is being recorded and will subsequently be posted on CAFRE and the Irish Farmers Journal websites. As stated earlier, a key reason for the live event is to allow you to ask questions of each of tonight's contributors. I encourage you to do so, and I will try to get all questions answered toward the end of the event. Those of you using laptops or PCs can ask questions using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. If you're using a mobile device, you can post questions by selecting the three-dot icon, which will appear once you tap your screen. The event will last approximately 1 hour. I will now pass you over to Darrell Boyd, the Better Farm Beef Challenge Programme Advisor.
Okay, thanks Francis. Thanks for joining us tonight, folks, and thank you, Jonathan, for participating in this tonight. To start with, Jonathan, can you just give the listeners a bit of a background to the farm?
Yes, hello Darrell. We're farming here currently outside Ballykelly, about 105 hectares. Split over a couple of land blocks mainly, and we're mostly suckler cows. We have a wee bit of arable, and we have dabbled in contract rearing in the past as well, but the sucklers are the main enterprise here on farm.
There's always been a suckler herd on the farm in some shape or form. Jonathan, can you give a brief overview of the system that you would have been running and where it is now? You know, you've been in the program 4 years now, kind of just the main change on farm in terms of your cow type and your numbers, etc.
Yes, well, historically, before I came home to farm, which was about 2013, my dad and my mother would have been the main sort of drivers in the farm, and they would have farmed usually about somewhere between 40 and 50 cows. Historically, the cows themselves would have been bred up from bucket reared calves that they would have got from first cross Frisian cows at a time. Laterally, it was mostly Limousin genetics then that were going on top of those cows, so they were getting to acquire a fairly Limousin-y type animal, very strong Limousin type animal, and they'd ended up, they bought an Angus bull then, sort of about 2011 to try and improve that. They were selling mostly a mix of selling live in the ring as sort of store cattle, and then they started to finish young bulls mostly, and then that's sort of whenever I came along as well, we were finishing young bulls, and that was sort of where they were at that stage. And then coming into the program, we've upped cows quite a lot, and we're always trying to get up to a number of about 90 cows calving is our target. We're currently running about 70 cows, but we're keeping a very large proportion of our heifers every year to try and build that figure up. Since I've sort of come on board, then we've looked at using the stabilizer breed, and cows are mostly now of the Angus cross stabilizer influence. We're trying to go down the stabilizer route that wee bit more. We're taking around half of our meals to finish as young bulls, and the other half are as steers. As I say, we're breeding quite a lot of our heifers at the minute. We've been trying to do that this last 3 or 4 years to try and build the numbers up as quite a long, slow burn, but it's meaning that I can have quite a high turnover then of animals as well. And then whatever heifers in that we don't breed, then we take through to beef.
Jonathan, I suppose I'll just come in there in terms of the progress made on farm through the benchmarking. We monitor that through CAFRE benchmarking, and like yourself and the farmers in the program, there's kind of a target gross margin per hectare that we are looking to get in around £1,000 gross margin per hectare. Why we target that? Average fixed costs across the group, and also CAFRE benchmark farms are sitting in around the 750 mark pounds. So if we're not looking to go beyond 750 up into £1,000 gross margin, we're not going to deliver any profit. So that's why we're aiming for £1,000 to deliver a profit after fixed costs. And from your table, Jonathan, you were starting from a relatively low base there in 2016, but you've made fantastic progress. You're up to 750, well above our expectations, I suppose, from 4 years ago. So what we're going to talk about tonight really is, off the back of that, some of the changes you've made, with the bulk of it being animal health when we come to that. On from that, really, we're looking at a video now of some of your cows and calves just at this stage. And as we've already discussed there, as I mentioned, Jonathan, you've had a dramatic rise in stocking rate, which is continuing, as I said, and stocking rate's highly correlated to profit. What have you been doing? What have you been adopting on farm to make this happen? Is it off the back of grassland, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, the key to increasing your stocking rate is to try and get as much grass into your animals as best you can. I suppose the main way we've been doing that is adopting the paddock grazing system and getting a good rotation going on there. And ways to do that, then you have to just invest in things like fencing and troughs and spend a bit of time measuring grass, especially at the start and the middle of the season, whenever grass could get away from you very easily. I suppose coming into that as well as measuring your soil and getting your soil sampling doing and getting your statuses so you know what to apply and what is lacking and what is needing reseeded and what is needing lime. Lime's very important for the whole thing. And just trying to grow as much grass as we can, and more importantly, utilise that grass, and try and get the cattle going off at the right stage of the grass as well.
And Jonathan, off the back of that, these are the calves we're looking at. They're destined to be slaughtered as bulls, probably the heaviest weaning male calves you have on the farm there at the minute. What's the nutrition plan or the management of these bulls going forward, just very briefly?
Well, once these calves are weaned, they'll be offered first cut silage, the highest quality silage we have on farm, and then their meal, they'll be offered their meal, and the level of their meal will start around a couple of kilos, and that'll rise roughly each month by a kilo or so until they get to about 500 to 550 kilos live weight, and then they'll be most likely offered adlet concentrate and straw to get a good finish with them. Although if I do have silage reserves from my first cut by that stage, I may consider using silage in meal and reducing the amount of meal that I have to put into them, but that's to be seen whether I have enough silage left come sort of January, February time.
And the performance of the bulls, Jonathan, this last number of years, they've been growing each year, getting better each year?
They have. I think that's hopefully in the back of better genetic merit coming through in the bulls. It's worked out quite nicely. Hopefully I can maybe put a wee bit more onto it as well in the carcass game.
Yeah, and the last bulls that you killed there, the 2019 born bulls, they had an average carcass gain per day of 0.88 kilograms of carcass gain per day, which is a good average across a number of animals, and that's growing from 0.84 back in 2018. So the work is showing its rewards. So what about your cows on farm, Jonathan? Fertility wise, weaning weights, what's the performance like there?
Fertility wise, fertility is pretty good in our herd, I have to say. even from going way back, even whenever mum and dad used to do a lot of it, we were always dodging in around the sort of the 365 mark. I mean, the last 3 years, Area 18 was 362, 19 361, 2020 365. So it's fairly good there now. So it'll be bang on target what we're expecting. And the 200-day weight weaning there, that's something that I think we're going to have to really try and push. It started out in 2017 about 37%. It went up in the next 2 years to 44 and 40%, and I'd be hopeful that it would be around sort of the mid 40s again this time, hopefully. But that's somewhere where an area where we're definitely going to have to make improvements now. The calf live weight gains up significantly from 17, and that's really where improvements can be made, especially in the bull beef end of it. But going forward, even calves that you destine for steers, going forward, the best that they can do on the mother, it carries right through to the end of their life. We've seen here.
And so, Jonathan, hopefully that gives people listening a brief background to the farm and what it is you're doing. But we're into the time of year now when cattle are starting to be housed, a number of them housed already, and it's an important time of year just to assess what stocks are on farm of silage and what you need. Are you going to get through the winter? Just a wee picture here, Jonathan, of you weighing some of your bales coming in. You can see this one was in excess of 900. Now, I'm not saying that needs to be done to have an accurate fodder budget, but it gives just ourselves a wee bit more accuracy. The fact that you took a couple of sample bale weights back when you were making them. So the first stage that you do in a fodder budget, and we've done this for Jonathan's farm, is work out exactly what you have on farm. And Jonathan here, he's two different types of first cut. It's just basically two different areas that they come from, maybe 2 different days. And his second cut, we have the analysis in there. You can see it's excellent stuff. Some of the first cut there, it's over 76 D value, and second cut, never mind first cut, it's fantastic as well at 74.5 D value. So we have all that figures. We have the quantities, but you've 1,200 bales on farm this year. Average bale weight 900. So we've over 1,000 tons available on farm. So that's our first stage, and the important part of that there is, one, the quantity, but even bigger than that, get your silage tested so we know how much is needed per animal group as such. And that's something that we do on farms. On Jonathan's farm here, this is just an example of using that exact information in terms of the D value of the silage, what level it's at, what meal requirement we have, and what amount of silage needs to be feeding for each type of animal. In this example, a 350 kilo steer, medium sized breed, gaining 0.8 kilos of a day, so a store through the winter time. And you can see, because you have fantastic silage, Jonathan, it's only recommended just over a kilo of meal being fed to that animal. When we have accurate data like that there, we can then have a very accurate feel for the amount of silage required. And that's what this table's showing. We go through the amount of animals on farm in each group. You can see the various different groups there, from spring cows, the number of them, when they're going to be housed, when they're going to be turned out. In reality, we've no idea, but we've taken a figure there of when we hope to have the average turnout and the kilos a day, and multiply that across, and you can see there that the farm is sitting with an excess of silage, which is in a good position to be coming into the winter time. Another way we can save quite a bit of silage is by using scanning and body condition score of cows and feeding appropriately. Craig, I'd like to bring you in at this stage. In your own opinion, is there many farmers out there, or suckler farmers out there, scanning their cows? Is there enough of them doing it? And what's the benefits of actually getting your cows scanned?
There's more and more farmers now starting to realise that fertility examinations, getting their cows back quicker in calve, knowing when they are calving. There is a few, about 45, 50, 55%. The benefits, basically scanning, knowing your dates, especially for vaccinations. And it is also then knowing if they're scanned early enough for twins, and also with that, the body condition score in them, so that if they are of a lower body condition score, that they're getting more feed value within their time whenever their other calf has been weaned off them, so that they're in better condition at the point of calving.
And Craig, on top of that, I suppose it identifies the culls fairly early on, so that the likes of Jonathan isn't feeding throughout the winter time expecting the calf to be there. So he can fatten those cows now and get them away earlier rather than feeding them through the whole winter time. And
Exactly.
we can target feeding as well for those cows that's over conditioned, as you say. We can restrict feeding and sometimes saving up to £20 a head per cow through the winter time if we feed appropriately based on our body condition score and our calving date. Craig, you and your practice supply a really detailed report that's on screen here at the minute. Can you just talk us through exactly what you can tell us from scanning in this report, and as well, from your point of view, the ideal time to scan a group of cows?
So the report that we use is Vet and Press. So we actually, through a signature, GDPR signature, can download the herd list from the Department of Agriculture. Then what we can then dab the numbers onto the handheld as we're scanning them, and then give them the dates. The other thing that you can do while you're doing it is you can actually body condition score the cows at the point of scanning. But with Johnny, what we can do as well is through a network and password and an app that he would have on his phone, he can actually body condition score the cows 3-4 times a year as he feels appropriate. And then watch the trends through graphs. What we also do with it is on that report is it actually gives him then a date of calving. The best time to get your most accurate dates is between that 28, 30 days up to 120 days of pregnancy. That is as well, you can sex them, and you're usually within 3-4 days either way off your exact calving date.
And I see a column there, just Craig, as well, viability. Can you detect, if a cow's likely going to abort or something like that?
Basically what you can find as well in those earlier times of pregnancy is if you got a weak heartbeat, or you will find those what they call a schistosomas, an inside out calf, because there's irregularities at the navel or at the legs, the front and back legs, and the way that the rib cage is. So you can identify, and are starting to identify more at those earlier times of scans.
It's a fantastic report, Craig, and I suppose it just gives Jonathan more armour to do or to work with going into the winter months. And so by using this silage analysis, accurate scanning results and body condition score of cows, we can batch cows according to their nutritional needs and really have targeted feeding, so the cows calving down in as close to the condition as we want her in. Jonathan, this is your main cow house where most of the cows would be wintered. Can you just talk us through what you normally do?
Yes, we would batch the cows. There's 5 pens, and we would batch the cows into particular needs of feeding. So if there's cows that would need a wee bit more feeding, we'd maybe need ad lib. There's cows that will need maybe a bit taken off them, and there's cows that would just need fed for maintenance, and that's how we batch them up. And then maybe later on the season we batch them into predicted calving dates then with the scanning.
Jonathan, this is just a video of the replacement heifers on farm this year, all settled in calf now. You're calving everything at 2 years old. What breeding system is used on the farm, and how did scanning actually go that we talked about with Craig there earlier?
With regards to the breeding of the heifers, the last number of years now we've been AIing them, and we found it works well. We've been breeding the natural heats and using the Mucol heat detection system to aid us with that. We've basically been trying to use bulls that have, first of all, easy calving figures for the heifers, and then just other advantageous figures. Then we used a bull last year called Resolution, and this year we used a bull called Nobleman. His figures are pretty good for calving and pretty good for growth and other maternal characteristics. We bred 34 heifers in total this year, and 30 of them are settled in calf. And when we came to scan, when Craig scanned them, there's one had a tail cyst and one had small ovaries, so they weren't going to be bred anyway. And we actually ended up pulling another one of those heifers out because she was poor temperament, so we didn't actually breed her and end up. So I'm pretty happy with how it went, really, to be honest.
And in total, Jonathan, what scanning percentage you looking like this year?
We're looking at around the 92%. We have 98 animals out of 107 settled in calf there, so we're pretty happy with that. We had plans that we made in. Yeah, that was over 12 weeks. The cows themselves were bred for 10, and then the heifers got a wee bit longer. They got into 12 weeks.
And Jonathan, using AI, how do you find that, the observation of cows, or are you using any technology there to help you in doing that?
Yes, we're using the Mucol heat detection system, so that we have a teaser bull, a vasectomized bull in with the heifers, and he wears a collar, and then each of the heifers wears an EID tag, and whenever there's an activity around between the bull and the heifer, it sends a wee message to my phone. And along with that, I use it as an aid. I don't let it dictate what we do entirely. I will watch for heats as well. And we also we're running the heifers in a paddock system around a yard. So we have three small fields around a yard, split into 10 different sections. And it in itself makes the heat detection a lot easier as well, because the cattle are used to moving the new grass all the time. They're well settled. They're getting nice leafy grass in front of them, and you're spending a lot more time with them anyway, because you have to be down maybe once or twice a day anyway to move them. So that in itself is a great job, and it's very easy then to bring them into the yard in the centre of those three fields. So from a purely work-related or labour-intensive aspect, it doesn't work out as too bad.
So on to the second part of our discussion tonight, which is really around animal health planning and taking a proactive approach. Just when we're talking here, you'll see in the background a bit of an animal health plan for Jonathan in terms of timings for vaccinations for pneumonia and other vaccinations throughout the year. And that's what often people associate with animal health plan, is a calendar or to-do date. But I think there's a lot more to that. Craig, when farmers hear the words, animal health planning, a lot of people just think of a chart in the background here, which is useful to remind the farmer what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. But as I said before, I believe that's a very small part of animal health planning, and it's actually the relationship between farmer and vet which produces a good health plan and a good approach to animal health. Would you agree with me there?
Yeah, so you need to have a good relationship actually with the client, and then it's the communication from the both sides to basically put a good proactive plan in place. So it's not like the fire brigade work that used to be, we're trying to basically keep animals alive, keep animals healthier, increase and speed up their weight gains, and get them to the point of either breeding or slaughter quicker.
Yeah, and for the likes of the plans in the background, here it's not fixed in stone. It should be a dynamic document as well, but the relationship there is what's important. And you have had a good relationship with Jonathan and his family before that over the last number of years.
Yes. So it based on the plan that we have, and with every year, with usually around either the TB test, the scan, or a problem, or at the quality assured audit, we basically will maybe change the plan to fit what we think is for happening for the next year, based on the problems that we have had in the previous year or the previous years, and is to try and mold it better to the Blair's type of suckler herd.
Yeah, their own unique situation, I suppose, and farm. But
yeah,
well, with that in mind, tonight we're going to talk through just 2 or 3 of the big groups of stock on farm and how they've been managed. At the moment here, just we've a video of this year's springborn calves. This was back in March time, and there's a lot to do in terms of the health and the performance of the calf, them getting off to a good start, feeding of the cow and vaccinating pre-calving, which we'll talk about more, and also the calving environment as well. But that was back in the spring. At grass, throughout the year, Craig, I'd certainly believe that treatment for young stock for the likes of worms or coccidia by calendar is no longer fit for purpose due to erratic weather patterns, and yourself that we see in the summer now. Would you agree with that, Craig? And are fecal eggs really the way forward in your mind?
Both myself and Johnny would very much agree, and I would be very proactive in promoting fecal analysis, especially under the environmental conditions that we are. And for example, we were later this year having coccidiosis than we were in previous years. So why treat for coccidiosis when you haven't got it? So with the fecal analysis, with Johnny and Joe, we were able to kind of time right of when to go in to give the animals their coccidiosis dose, their worming dose, whether to worm or not worm. And even to recent times, I was able to warn Johnny in 2-3 weeks, keep an eye, these animals are starting with immature rumen fluke. You'll nearly need to be in 2 or 3 weeks dosing them. And hopefully Johnny has seen the benefits on that, being patient and waiting to give them that dose in 3 weeks' time rather than wasting the dose 3 weeks earlier.
And not only wasting a dose and wasting money, Craig, there, but by using tests and only treating when needed, surely that's going to help in the whole issue around, anthelmintic resistance and other things like that.
Very much so. And what we have tried to do, and I think hopefully Johnny will agree with me, is reduce the volume of anthelmintics that they are using. And by using the fecal analysis, we have hopefully reduced his cost of anthelmintics, but also reduced time. It's more even a time management. There's only himself and his father and his mother on the farm, and labour is a struggle. So at times, whenever you can take a fecal analysis and says, right, Johnny, don't dose for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or get me a sample now, and your worm egg count is so low, leave them another 3 or 4 weeks. It actually is a better time management tool as well as helping with your anthelmintic resistance.
And Jonathan, in terms of these young calves, their first grazing season, what has been the treatment routine for the likes of the stomach worms for these calves?
Basically, in June, we gave them a bit of a blanket cover. This was more so to minimise build-up within swards rather than in any individual animal problems that we had. And from then on, I decided that what I was going to do was take fecal samples and then discuss with Craig the results then. So that's what we did moving forward.
Yeah, and Craig, something that's talked about a lot as well is immunity in livestock and possibly farmers overdosing. This approach that you are doing on farm, the relationship between the two years and using testing, that's bound to have a lifelong effect on these calves, especially those that are retained in the herd for breeding in terms of immunity.
Well, that's the idea behind what you're trying to do. So you're trying to give the animals, whether they be calves, whether they be maiden heifers, pregnant heifers, fattening bullocks, cows, bulls, is to give them a slight challenge so that they do get immunity, and then dose at the correct times so that, one, they have the immunity, and two, you've allowed them to, you've decreased the challenge and allowed them to keep either their weight gain and control or their body condition score and control.
Yeah, and you know, we've talked a fair bit about worms and dosing there, Craig, but these calves in the screen now, they're the weanlings for this year. They're about to be weaned, and if not in the process already. It's a big step for calves, very stressful. Johnny's vaccinating for pneumonia and IBR. For maximum immunity, Craig, when do farmers need to be starting to think about vaccinating with the mindset of housing in, say, mid-October? It could be any time, but for maximum, depending on weather, but for maximum immunity, when do they need to be getting, you know, the vaccines in there?
They probably, again, it kind of comes down to when are we going to house, when are we not going to house, but they should be at least having the IBR and the pneumonia vaccine in them within that 4 to 3 weeks pre-housing, and then the second jag just as they go into the house. Revolved around that, Darrell, as well as this stress, keeping stress to a minimum. The other thing as well, which Johnny tries to do, is clipping tails and clipping hair along their backs. It acts like a third lung, so there's less sweat on them. We can take coats off when we're hot and sweaty. The cattle can't. So this clipping across these two strips either side down their backs is acting like a third lung as well. And then weaning them at the correct time, getting them in. Don't be bringing them in one of these over wet days. Try and get them in on a dry day. Bring them in, and then they are dry when they do go in and less sweaty.
Oh, that's fantastic, Craig. Thank you. And Jonathan, on top of the vaccination of the calves, you're taking other steps as well, just to really try and alleviate the stress at weaning. Can you describe them and your own thoughts to the success of them, or how they work on farm?
Yeah, I mean, as you say there, it's all about trying to reduce the stress in the calves at this time. And one of the first things to do is to try and get the calves to graze ahead of the cows. To get them, first of all, to get them on the best possible grass so that they're getting the best possible nutrition at this time, but also to slowly reduce the cow-calf bond. It's much more advantageous to do that slowly rather than to do an abrupt halt, we find. We would feed meal then to the male calves that do creep ahead. Again, this is to try and increase the weight, but also to slowly wean them off their dependency on the milk. The heifer calves they're now currently housed with their mothers, and they have access to meal in the creep pens. And just this week as well, what we've done, we've started to wean some of those heavier heifer calves. And the way we do that is we try and do it in a two-stage system. We use nose flaps to try and achieve that. They're brilliantly simple things, and although some calves will either lose or beat them, in general, calves wean very settled and without stress. So I think all these things together, we try to use them to alleviate the stress in the calves, and we find they work well. The nose flaps especially, they don't give such an abrupt separation, which then can lead to a lot of balling from calves.
So moving on from this year's weanlings as such, Jonathan, this is a group of the 2019 born male calves, which you can see on screen now. They are the steers, and they're now in their most expensive period of their lives, I suppose, the finishing period for them. Jonathan, can you just go over, the kind of turnout weights there and the management of these stores through the spring and the summer, how they did at grass?
These cattle are probably the definition of why I think calves on their mother is the most important time of the year. They did very poorly on their mother, and they overwintered poorly as a result, and they were only turning out at an average of 320 kilos. That was on about the 3rd of April. As a result, and up until sort of early June time, they did very well, and they did a bit of compensatory growth, I suppose, off the really good grass, and they gained about 1.2 a day. However, from that point until the start of August, we weighed them again, and they'd only achieved 0.3 kilos a head a day. So we're putting that maybe down to weather as much as anything. From June until August, it was pretty wet here and pretty miserable for cattle out in the field. But we brought them in. They were housed there on the 14th of September, and we weighed them last week. And they've caught up a bit now. They're up to about 490 kilos of an average. So they've gained maybe just over the kilo there, but 1.1 since August. Now, that's probably as much as anything from coming into the house, and also from we started to give them a meal. So they've caught up a wee bit, and they're now split into two groups. Say there's some that we finished before the rest of them. They'll go on to finishing diet now. I sampled them. I dung sampled them there so shortly after housing, and they came back that they had quite a high warm egg count, and they had quite a lot of rumen fluke and a bit of liver fluke floating about. So we dosed, and we used a pour on and a drench there when we weighed them. So hopefully that should be them sorted now.
And really, the same approach has been taken with these stores as the younger calves this year, an early worm dose in June, and then from then on, in as required via fecal egg counts. Craig, when taking this approach, how often would you be advising samples being taken for each group of stock, and does farmer judgment come into the key in taking account of weather or other factors, or how often would you be testing?
Darrell, it's very dynamic, and it's not like a once a month type of approach. You're relying on a good herds person. He knows or she knows the stock inside out, and if they start to see a change in the animal, whether it be hair standing on their tail head, or not enough gut fill or rumen fill, or just maybe even off weighing on their weigh scales, that they're not maybe getting enough weight gain, that's the time to take your dung samples. It is a dynamic thing. It's, as I say, it's not like a set in stone timetable of 1st of July, 1st of September, or the 1st of August, we take these dung samples. A lot of it does kind of come down to the kind of the client-vet relationship and knowing what we're looking for and what they need or what they're trying to find.
No, it's a very good point, Craig, because at the end of the day, if we're saying that the calendar treatments don't work or no longer have a function, why would calendar testing work? As you say, it has to, farmer and vet experience has to come in there in terms of the right time to do the testing. Would you just be taking a fresh sample of a small percentage of the group, or?
Well, what I try to do, and I've done with Johnny, is depending on the size of the group, but usually what we're looking for out of that group is between 10 and 20%. It doesn't mean as well that you take all, for example, if they've all got severe diarrhea, is take all the diarrhea ones. It has to be a uniform across the batch approach.
Yeah.
And usually with Johnny, it's between 10 and 20% that is that he's taken. But if you're down to a small number, like I say, it's 10 or 15 in a batch, I usually still like about 3, 4, 5. 5 is what I do like out of the batch.
And
I make out of that then what I would call a pooled fecal analysis. So for each fecal analysis, you need 50 grams. So out of each of those samples, I take 10 grams of the 5 samples to make up my 50 grams. And if they start to see a change in the animal, whether it be hair standing on their tail head or not enough gut fill or rumen fill, or just maybe even off weighing on their weigh scales, that they're not maybe getting enough weight gain, that's the time to take your dung samples.
Craig, your own thoughts on this group of stock? Flying performance, as Johnny said, when they went to grass. Worms, you know, you were testing and covering for it. Performance flew or fell in the middle of the summer. What's your own thoughts? There's mixed messages out there about rumen fluke and the effect it has on its performance. What's your own thoughts there on this group of animals? Because they've been covered well for everything else.
I think we got a wee bit caught out, Darrell, has been quite honest. The wet weather that we got in July and part of August kind of caught quite a few of us out, and the next thing Johnny says to me, this batch of stock is not doing well. Got a few dungs off them. We would usually be only starting to be getting this rumen fluke at the late end of August, September into October, and we were starting to get it in August. The life cycle is about 6 to 8 weeks, probably with the amount of moisture that we were getting and the bad months. It just exacerbated it, along with the high relative humidity and heat, and there was a wee bit of caught out in the process, learning on the hoof every day. But as soon as we started to dose at them, they kind of they started to perform better.
Yeah.
But with it, what I will say is it kind of took the second dose. The trouble is with these rumen fluke doses is there's no persistency. So if you dose today, they're picking up the next life cycle from tomorrow. So within, depending on the intensity, between 6 to 8 weeks, they're basically at adult rumen fluke again within their stomachs.
Yeah. And Craig, finally on this group of animals, you know, I've already said they're in their most expensive period. We've talked about worms, we've talked about fluke. In my own opinion, external parasites can be as big a problem to performance as any holding cattle back. Should farmers be treating for lice before housing to minimise the infestation? And in your own opinion, you mentioned clipping there as being like a third lung for an animal. Do you think clipping helps with lice as well, and other external treatment of parasites?
Definitely. Clipping has those two benefits. You've got your you've got your third lung, so it's actually helping them with reduced sweating, especially in those later months where you've got your stiller air in the middle of winter when there's no air movement in the sheds. It definitely helps them with the sweating. But even clipping them right up across the withers, right up onto their head, right down around their tail, especially down around their tail head, it definitely helps and reduces the amount of mange that we would find in the house.
Yeah. No, definitely there'll be a lot of people agreeing with that, Craig. This short video here, just an example of some of the cows, and we can't talk about animal health planning and the suckler herd without talking about our cows. As mentioned before, the treatment of cows pre-calving can help the survival rate of our calves. Jonathan, what all do you vaccinate the cows on farm for?
We're fairly comprehensive with vaccine for lepto, BVD, scars and salmonella.
So, Jonathan, you're covering your cows there with a lot of different vaccinations. Craig, I'll come back to you there. I suppose scanning of the cows this time of year really helps with the efficiency of vaccinations as well.
Yeah, well, it definitely helps with, especially with the pre-calving scour vaccine for Johnny, and at least gives him a more accurate data of exactly when to inject them. And because of Jonathan's kind of small calving window, he can really do most of the animals all at the one time. What also then just with the lepto jags, especially then whenever they're going to grass, that they're all fresh cows going to grass, freshly calved, with the leptospirosis vaccine.
And when you're on that topic, Craig, people would vaccinate and say they don't have a problem. They maybe stop, but maybe they don't have a problem with that because they are vaccinating. Take for an example, leptospirosis. There, what could the effects be on a suckler herd if it got in there?
We just simply had cows with health cleansings. That's all it was, and every cow had a health cleansing, and we were down, if not once a week, twice a week during his calving, cleaning out cows. And I suggested at that time that we would need to be taking a few blood samples, and off it we found a lot of high titers of leptospirosis. So on the back of that, that's where we simply started doing the leptospirosis vaccine. And then what we tried to do is, as well as we had maybe the odd early embryonic death or a cow that wasn't in calf. And we basically found that vaccinating for the leptospirosis reduced that incidence. And I would say probably the last time I cleaned a cow out at the Blairs was for a cow that had twins.
Yeah, and ultimately, Craig, hell cleanings like that there, even with cleaning out, it's bound to affect fertility in the whole herd, and you're going to get less calves, and it's a cycle every year. You're spreading out the calving pattern as well. It doesn't belong paying for itself, the vaccinations there. And that's why a lot of farmers don't have issues that they're vaccinating for. So why stop vaccinating if you don't have the problem? Obviously, we talked about earlier about developing immunity in young stock, Craig. With the likes of the cows here in the background, is there an age that you don't treat mature cattle for worms, or again, is it just down to farmer experience and doing a test maybe post housing once a year with the cows?
I just am of the opinion cows are immune, but cows carry. So we will always fecal sample the cows, and the reason is if there's a high worm burden, fluke burden, or whatever, they're getting a dose, and usually they're more than likely that most people they're getting a dose at housing, and it basically is them cleaned out, and it gives the calves, in my opinion, a good start at grass whenever they all go out, and you're less likely then to have to dose your calves earlier. They
And it's back to a whole cycle again then, Craig. The actions that's taken now can affect the actions in the springtime, and the amount of drenches or whatever you need to use then. Basically, what you're saying.
In my opinion, I have found that calves that have had their mothers drenched or dosed in the winter are less likely to need a dose until they're at least probably 6 weeks old.
Yeah. No, very good point, Craig. As I say, the last wee thing here just on cows that I want to discuss very briefly is minerals. We can't talk about cows without having minerals. They play a key part in it. Would you suggest, what's the best test for minerals? Is it a blood test? And you know, for cows, they've different needs throughout the year, whether that's calving, whether that's breeding. Should people be feeding a different type of minerals throughout the year as well for their cows?
Well, you've basically down simply to your two types of minerals. You have your magnesium type of mineral, and then you've got your breeding mineral. So you have your pre-calving mineral, and then you've got your breeding or your mid-season mineral. Blood sampling is the ultimate way of finding out what is going on in your herd. And the people who do it, whether it be with a pre-serve blood sample or just a mid-season or pre-calving, definitely see the benefits of what is actually going on within their herd. One of the ones, there is a few of them, and you get now a report back which will actually tell you individually for each cow and for on a herd basis of what to look for and what to treat on a mineral basis.
Craig, finally, I'll let you sum up here in terms of animal health planning. Is there anything you'd add that we haven't discussed? Anything big that needs to be looked at or would add to the health of the farm?
What I would say, first of all, is with the herd planning and fecal analysis and all that we have did at the Blairs, the amount of vet calls has been drastically reduced. So we are not treating the sick animals that we used to treat. We're not the fire brigade job anymore. It is more on a proactive basis. Along with the scanning, yes, you do get your sick animals, you get your tight calvings, but the amount of veterinary fees for sick animals on the basis of what we have done with the vaccination program and the fecal program for parasites, we have drastically reduced the amount of calls. As on what to do next, I think what we will do is just both myself and Johnny will have a good sit down based on what we have had from last year and try and be a bit more proactive in an approach with what weather and climate we are getting involved with for next year. I feel that vaccines for Johnny and Joe is working extremely well. I think we've just had a little blip on the fecal analysis and we were caught out a bit. And I think we just need a bit more of our heads up, depending on what the weather does next summer.
Craig, thanks very much. And thanks for being so honest, Craig, because there's, people don't listen or get something out of hearing that it's all sunshine and it never rains. It's good to hear when things haven't worked out or where it can be and how you've addressed it, really. So thanks for being so honest. Thanks very much, folks, for listening tonight. I'm going to hand back to Francis now, and he will deliver us with some questions, hopefully. Thank you.
Thanks, Darrell, and thanks all for that really interesting insight into Jonathan's farm. We have a lot of people logged in here, and a lot of questions to get through, so I'll go straight to them, and we said we'd wrap up within an hour. First of all, yourself, Jonathan, and I know that those videos were taken back in September. Were those calves getting creep fed at that point? And what is your creeping strategy? Are your heifer calves getting creep on your bull calves, or how are you managing that?
Yes, at that stage they were on creep, but it was only for a matter of a couple of weeks. We would usually start the creeping in sort of late August time. At the moment, it's only the bull calves that get creep in the grass, grass with their mothers. The heifer calves, we're not too concerned about trying to get as much weight in them. We're happy enough if they're happy to graze ahead of their mothers and break the bond that way. But with the bull calves, especially whenever those destins for bull beef is minimal. Last 20 kilo at that stage. At the minute now they're up to a couple of kilos. So yeah, they were.
Okay, and just one other one for you here, Jonathan. You mentioned killing half of the male calves as steers and half as bulls. This question here: are bulls not the most efficient system? And what weights are you expecting to get your bulls to?
Finishing males as young bulls are usually the most efficient way, but only the most efficient way if you can graze all your grass efficiently with more cows. Our stocking rate is really too low at the minute to finish everything as bulls, because we really need to have some steers grazing some more grass that we don't have cows on. That's just because we're trying to still grow numbers. We aren't at our optimum yet. It also spreads the risk, having a couple of different types of animals to sell and at different times of year. So it aids cash flow when you're selling at different times of the year. And I suppose there's a third reason as well. The performance of some of our bottom cows perhaps wouldn't be as what we would like them to be to finish everything as bulls. Because we're growing our numbers so quickly, we're perhaps retaining some females that maybe wouldn't be the most milky or the most maternal, and as a result their calves wouldn't just be at the top end where we'd want them to be. So it's perhaps more efficient to finish those animals as steers as opposed to bulls. Dead weight wise, we've been dodging in around the 380 to 390 kilogram carcass this last number of years. We killed them a wee bit heavier this year just with the way the price went, but that's sort of where we're aiming, around 380 kilos dead weight.
And just on that, Darrell mentioned a carcass gain of 0.88 of a kilo a day. So that's a 380, 390 kilo bull at what age?
They're usually in around the 14 months. They were slightly heavier slightly older this year just with the way it is, but usually in around the 14 to 14 and a half months.
Okay, Craig, one here for yourself. Just on those steers that hadn't performed maybe so well in the house, was a blood sample taken off those? And surely it's more likely to be an issue with a mineral deficiency than rumen fluke.
The first protocol was the fecal analysis. The reason being for the fecal analysis was just for the clinical signs that most me and Johnny could see. The next protocol would have been a blood sample if we hadn't found anything off the fecal analysis. The problem with the blood sample was it was going to take maybe, because of problems we've been having, it was going to maybe take 2 or 3 weeks, months to get the blood sample results back. And from what we could see from the clinical signs, from what I could see from the microscope, the rumen fluke, the worm egg count, and the touch of liver fluke, that was the best protocol to go with first.
Okay. And another question here, Craig, for yourself. Where does animal health planning fit into your daily role, or is it still mostly fire brigade work?
Because of the way most of the farmers are getting a bit more educated and the type of work that we're doing, there is less fire brigade work and there's more routine visits on farm, whether it be for your fertility work or herd health planning.
And I suppose what's the greatest barrier to that? Why are more people not, taking that proactive approach as you described earlier, and bringing you out to maybe go through an animal health plan, or what vaccinations maybe they should try to fit in for the year?
Well, one of the things would be the farmer sees this as a cost rather than being part of the team. And it's just trying to get them round from that mindset. Usually what you do find is it takes a major disaster of an outbreak of pneumonia or an abortion storm for them to realise that the best way forward is with herd planning and vaccination.
Okay. And there's one other question here, Craig, for yourself. do you see much anthelmintic resistance across farms? And is there anything that farmers can do to overcome this?
We are starting to see bits and pieces of it. I would, in Northern Ireland, would see less than when I was working in England or in America. We have seen it on a few of our sheep farms, and we're now starting to see a bit of look-aside resistance and coccidiocidals resistance more, especially on dairy farms. But it is starting to creep in, and that is one of the reasons, Francis, for these fecal analysis is the timing and then using the correct dose so that you're not creating this anthelmintic resistance.
Okay. And Darrell, one for you here, and it's on the vaccinations. What would be the standard cost of vaccinations amongst the farmers that you're working with? And are the protocols really worthwhile?
Well, Francis, across the farms within the program, some people will be vaccinating for more than others, botulism, stuff like that. There, not every farm's doing that, but if you take, for example, what Jonathan's doing there, it would be the standard for what most of the fellas in the program are doing. And if we take a per cow place basis, it's coming into around 33, between 30 and 35 pound per cow place, but that's for vaccinations, and that's, you know, including the cow, including what replacements there is that year, and including all of the calves and the young stock. And for the likes of Jonathan's farm there, between 90 and 100 cows, you're talking like just over £3,000 in vaccinations alone. And is it worthwhile? I think the vast majority of people, and all of them in the program, would say that it very much is. If you take account of what we talked about earlier with lepto cows not possibly getting back in calve, possibly losing calves around calving time through pneumonia or after calving pneumonia or scours, you don't be long losing out on that money. And that's just, or getting that money back, and that's just what we can quantify easily. I'm sure Craig would agree that even that calf that takes the pneumonia or takes a cough and it's treated and it seems to come out of it, the damage can be done to the lungs, and the lifetime performance of that calf can be slightly harder to quantify, but it's still costing the farmer money. So yeah, and around that 30 to 35 pound per cow place, and I don't think anyone would say that that stop with the vaccinating protocol that they're doing in the program.
Okay, another one for you here, Craig. Saying, how accurate would you claim sexing at scanning to be, and what's the real benefit of that, or is it very beneficial?
You're not always 100% accurate. It could be some days it could be like pulling a friend. But no, we are getting more and more accurate at it, and you're usually within that 90% accuracy, and improving it all time. The kind of benefit is especially more, it's not really for the heifers, it's more for the bulls, and especially bull calves coming out of heifers, and it's that kind of giving the guys a warning that, right, we have a bull here, and whether we need to be doing a cesarean or need to be watching the cow's weight coming up to calving.
Okay, and just one on the approximate cost for blood sampling for mineral status.
You may be able to answer that more, Francis, on the department, but
okay,
I would approximate for your full thing. I kind of forget here now. It kind of caught me in the hop, but I would say usually per animal, it is usually in around that 20 to 25 pound.
Yeah, and I suppose it'll depend, Craig, as well, what exactly you're going to test for. If it's just for copper, is it for selenium and iodine, or it depends what exactly you're going to go for. The basic ones probably cost between £15 and £20. I suppose it depends if you want to go a wee bit deeper. And just moving on from that, Jonathan, do you cover your growing cattle for minerals at grass? And if so, how are you doing that?
We are the last couple of years now. We have started to bolus cattle going to grass returning. I would say last year we found a benefit in it. We definitely did. There was a lot more weight gain gathered in those cattle once they came off the grass again. This year's a wee bit different because of the issues with that particular group of cattle. With that the fecal analysis brought up, they haven't quite done as well. They've done about 0.9 kilos a day roughly over the entire grazing period, which isn't that bad, but it could be better. But yeah, there was a question earlier about whether we should have sampled them. Those steers were done with a bolus, so that was another reason why we wanted to sort of go down the fecal route. But yeah, we've been doing bolusing now this last couple of years and found it to be a good job.
Right. And just on the weight gain of those calves, I mean, they're not real showy calves. They're not your really carcass type animals that you see out there. But what weight gains are you expecting to get, or what are you getting for your heifer and bull calves? Bearing in mind they're an Angus stabilizer cross.
We would be aiming for over the period with their mother. We'd be aiming for about 1.1 for a heifer calf, and we'd be hoping for 1.3 with a bull calf. Now there is great variation in our herd, and as I sort of alluded to earlier, with the fact that we've been growing that fast, and we're potentially keeping cows that we wouldn't ordinarily want to keep. That could range from anything from about a kilo up to, we've had a couple of bull calves get on to 1.7 a day, and that's where you want to be. You want to be able to weigh those calves and figure it out, because there's plenty of people out there who have said to me in the past, why do you weigh cattle? The only time I ever need to know a weight of a cattle is when it's in the ring or when it's on the hook. And that's baloney as far as I'm concerned. Whenever you weigh your calves, you figure out what cows need to be kept and what cows need to go. It's simple as that. And that is the single biggest thing that I see in this farm of raising those weights for those calves, is removing the poor cows and replacing them with heifers that have better potential. So hopefully going forward, we can settle at a good average of 1.1 to 1.3 for each. Maybe even increase that, maybe to 1.2 and 1.4 would be really, really, really ideal. But again, I mean, the weather plays such a big part in it as well. I mean, sure, we can remember this summer's been nothing but rain after June, so that makes a big difference.
Okay, and one more for you here, Jonathan. Your gross margin per hectare has went from, I think it's 62 up to 750 something, or thereabouts. What's been the biggest factor that's drove that for you? What's the thing that you've concentrated on most that you'd say is going to deliver that best?
It's all about pushing the stocking rate from grass. We could concentrate in other areas. We could concentrate on trying to produce higher quality cattle. However, the problem with that is we've been trying to do that for years previous, and we weren't getting anywhere because we weren't able to increase our cow number. What we were doing was just replacing our cows that we were removing with the heifers we were bringing in. We weren't getting anywhere. So what we've had to do is we had to drive the stocking rate, get more cows in calf to calf, and then sell. And then from that, then we have a better base then to improve our genetics within our herd, improve our performances from that. But definitely stocking rate, you have to get the stocking rate up. If you can, if your ground can hold it to a sustainable level, that'll be what will push your gross margin or your profit.
Perfect, Jonathan. And I'm conscious that we've went well over the hour here. Well, I just say that everyone that's online there at the moment, once this event is completed, please don't shut it down. There'll be a survey will automatically appear, and we'd appreciate if you could complete this, as it provides us with valuable information when developing future events. I want to finish by thanking all of tonight's contributors: Jonathan Blair, Darrell Boyd and Craig Campbell. And I also want to acknowledge the support of the programme partners, CAFRE, ABP and the Irish Farmers Journal. And finally, behind the scenes, our IT support tonight, Pamela Gardner. Thank you for watching and goodbye.